Now, in a pivotal vote that is expected to restore political stability in the troubled South Asian country of Bangladesh, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, led by late Khalida Zia's son Tarique Rahman, crossed the halfway mark to win the parliamentary elections. Ending a 25-year wait for power, the BNP is set to form the next government. Supporters of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party celebrated as local TV stations showed their party heading towards landmark parliamentary elections. BNP coalition won 212 seats in a landslide victory. Jamaat-e-Islami emerged as the main opposition, securing 70 seats. Youth Party NCP won just 5 of the 30 seats it contested. Shafiqur Rahman, chief of the Jamaat-e-Islami, won Dhaka, 15 in the capital, securing 85,131 votes, defeating his nearest BNP rival, who received 60,517 votes. More than 2,000 candidates, including many independents, were on the ballot, and at least 50 parties were contesting the seats. Now, with this victory, Tarique Rahman is all set to become Bangladesh's next Prime Minister, bringing an end to the 18-month interim government led by Muhammad Yunus. And upbeat Yunus, a Nobel laureate, said that the election day was a day of great joy. Tarique Rahman returned to the country from exile after nearly 17 years following his mother's death and quickly emerged as a frontrunner for Prime Minister's post in the absence of Awami League. This is the first election held in the country since students' protests in 2024, ending the 15-year rule of Sheikh Hasina. Hasina's party, the Awami League, was banned from contesting this election. These elections saw the country looking to move beyond the decades-long battle of Begum's era, and aim is the absence of both the Begums. The actual presence of women in competitive politics remains strikingly low. Now, as per Election Commission data, only 109, which is about 4.2%, were women, and 30 of the 51 registered parties had no female candidates at all. Now, Sheikh Hasina has called the elections voterless and illegal and demanded a full cancellation. Hasina had earlier called the elections a well-planned farce and demanded holding of free, fair and inclusive elections under the neutral caretaker government. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Tarique Rahman on BNP's victory. Modi assured that India will continue to stand in support of a democratic, progressive and inclusive Bangladesh. US Ambassador to Bangladesh congratulated the people of Bangladesh on a successful election and to the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Tarique Rahman on their historic victory. In fact, to speak more about this, we are joined in by Suhas Chakma, Director, Rights and Risk Analysis Group. Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies from JNU is also joining us. Suhas Chakma, let me ask this question to you first. There is a very concerning fact in this. One is that the Awami League's absence. Second, quite interestingly from this election that we see, is that the students who are supposed to have created the entire upheaval in Bangladesh have not done well in these elections. What does this say?
The students, we are not the students themselves, because if you remember, the quota movement was restricted to Dhaka University, and it was essentially picked up by the Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP, who joined the students' movement. So in that sense, it was not the students' movement per se which brought the government down. It was the movement of the Awami League and Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP, who were behind the students. So once the whole picture came out, once the Sheikh Hasina government had fallen, then the student leaders claimed themselves they were from the Islamic Chhatra Shibir, who did not identify themselves prior to the students' movement. So it's not surprising that the NCP, which the students had formed, they sided with the Jamaat-e-Islami, because essentially they were of the Jamaat-e-Islami, and I think that's where the also problem lies for India, because you cannot ignore the particular fact that this is a government which doesn't allow the Awami League. It was a government, which came up because of the machinations of the CIA and the Americans and the Europeans are just towing the line to sanctify whatever the CIA had done. So it's a replica of what was there, from 2014 onwards. Hasina was basically holding elections with her own alliances. Then she remained in power with the 14-party alliance. And now you basically have a friendly fight between the Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP, who belong to actually at the end of the day same alliance. I always say two sides of the same coin. So for India, I think the key challenge lies in that NCP or the students did not do well. They did not do well because they are part of the Jamaat-e-Islami, not even part of the BNP, which joined the bandwagon later, and that challenge remains.
Well, Professor Swaran Singh, who's joining us from the School of International Studies in JNU. Professor, how do you in fact see, I won't call it a legitimization, but it is a power deal that has been given to the Jamaat under the guise of democratic elections?
That's true that Jamaat, with the 74 candidates winning in these elections, has emerged as a major force. Right now, of course, most likely to sit as opposition to BNP government, which from 2001 to 2006, Jamaat was in alliance with BNP during that period of time. Now it sits in opposition. So in that sense, very clear advantage Jamaat has received in terms of becoming a legitimized political party in its own right, potentially likely to become even stronger because narratives in last 18 months has seen radicalization in overall discussion of various political parties. What is second interesting point to note is that unlike, let's say in India, Bangladesh has always, for whatever wrong or right reasons, seen decisive victories, whether it is for BNP or, of course, 2014 BNP had boycotted, last election to 2024 BNP had boycotted. So BNP has received a very clear majority, decisive majority, which means it's not likely to depend on anyone other than its own very small number of coalition partners. So fundamentally, India and other nations have to now look at what BNP stands for, what Tarique Rahman stands for, and how to engage. Indian Prime Minister has already congratulated Tarique Rahman on BNP's victory. So I think a certain amount of end of caretaker government, which had seen Dr. Yunus pandering to China, to United States, to Pakistan, and I think with a decisive mandate now in place, BNP leaders will have to look at long-term strategy as to how to ensure stability, security, and prosperity. They face enormous challenges of inflation, fundamental anxiety, and then even corruption charges and so on. So once they want to bring stability, peace, and prosperity, I think they'll have to choose their partners very carefully. And I believe that the language of Tarique Rahman is already showcasing a very, very positively inclined leader to engage India. And India has already showcased and gestured as a hand of friendship to the new leader. So hopefully that uncertainty and the kind of unusual interference of Pakistan, China, etc., should stabilize. And even if we understand that BNP traditionally has been the party which is not as close to India as Awami League was, which is no longer now an active political party in Bangladesh. So among the outfits that you today notice in Bangladesh on the political landscape, BNP seems to be relatively moderate and relatively more acceptable in that sense for India to engage with that leadership. And I think likewise, BNP leaders, including Tarique Rahman, also, I mean, it can go back to his youth when he was pretty, clearly anti-India because of the whole origin of BNP being anti-Awami League, against Awami League, and that rivalry made him often pander to the Pakistani narratives. But since then, even from his period of exile, he's been much more careful in, not appearing to be anti-India. And now lately his tenor and tone has become fairly pragmatic. And I think there is a possibility of reviving and, bringing back a very strong relationship with BNP once it forms the government. And I think we are waiting for announcements to be formally made today at 3 p.m. And we will soon know as to how India is going to move forward and revive that very strong relationship with the party in power in Dhaka now.
Well, so here's Chakma, one big question that is there. What is next for Muhammad Yunus, the person who is supposed to have headed this caretaker government, and of course, it is not without a lot of controversy. There was violence against the minorities. There were questions about changing the constitution. What next for Muhammad Yunus? One speculation is he'll be made the president of Bangladesh. The other is that he will go back to his teaching days and looking at retirement. But do you think Muhammad Yunus is going to retire or rather be elevated as the president of the country?
Well, I think that's where I think BNP find itself in a tricky situation, given the, you know, the public mobilization which had taken place for, referendum. But that referendum will be meaningless in the House of the Parliament. If the BNP has two-thirds majority, they can almost do anything which they want. And I do not see why the BNP would be interested to accept term limits for example, the Prime Minister. I mean, if Tariq Jia is only going to be the Prime Minister for 10 years, I don't think that is going to be acceptable to him. And that's not acceptable to any leaders of a major political party. So many of the reforms which they try to bring the interim government through these referendums will actually be thrown in the dustbin if BNP plays the real politics, because they would like to have their own president rather than Dr. Yunus. So that's where I think, I mean, the victory margin matters so much. And the way I think the landslide victory which is coming towards the BNP ultimately will have to decide on the floor of the House. They might decide for a Senate or whatever the format they have, but it is not necessary for the BNP to accept the constitutional reform which will impose the term limit, or where the president of the country to be elected by the same parliamentarians of the Jatiya Sanshad, to have the power to dismiss the entire parliament, which actually Yunus aspires to be. So in the end, I think Yunus will lose out because BNP has such a decisive majority. And if the BNP gives in, they know that it's going to be very, very difficult for them to come back, because then Yunus will interfere almost in everything. And at this point of time, they know that Yunus was interfering in everything, including the return of Tariq Jia to the country. So why would a major political party like the BNP would accept somebody who has no popular support or whatsoever, because they are the popular support would have been NCP. NCP has been completely wiped out. So if you are BNP, why will you accept somebody? They would might as well have there. So I think the only exit route for Dr. Yunus is to basically remain isolated, retire from it if he believes that he is delivered with lots of, problems, governance problem, violation of human rights, persecution of the minorities, banning of the army leagues, many of the abuses which took place in the last 2 years, they are not necessary. I think at the end of the day, they had tarnished the reputation of Dr. Yunus. These were not necessary, and I think the BNP would have won in any case. Even if there was Army League, BNP would have won the election in any case, because people also have not forgotten the one-party rule of the Army League. So I think, I mean, the entire reform process, which the interim government had brought in, they will just go into the that's been because BNP will not accept many of the things.
Well, let's in fact go to Professor Swaran Singh. Professor Swaran Singh, what about minorities in Bangladesh today? They were facing the brunt of this entire upheaval that was created. Those people who had been against them have got almost 70 to 74 seats in the parliament. How should the minorities be worried about the new situation in Bangladesh?
Clearly, I think VNP will have to deal with this very unusual challenge, where minorities have not only been, bearing the burnt of this whole radical violence, but they were also completely out of this whole July Charter as to how the constitutional amendments, which are going to be extensive in case the BNP follows up with the July Charter, they were not consulted. They have felt traumatized over a period of time. And as you mentioned, JMI has already now emerged as a major political party, right now sitting in opposition. So, assuaging their fears, assuaging fears of minorities would be a major responsibility. And that, in that sense, will also be necessary for BNP to earn that credibility in building international partnerships. One after another, Western countries have always been talking about human rights problems in Bangladesh. For example, the largest aid provider, United States, for Rohingyas rehabilitation, have repeatedly raised issues of human rights. So, not just countries of the West, but even India has often underlined the fact that Bangladesh should be, taking care of minorities, and particularly India is often concerned with the Hindu minority there. So that would be an important question for BNP leadership now, which has received a very, as I said, decisive mandate, and therefore they are not to be worried about what other opposition party or what Dr. Yunus wants to do or how he wants to see his future. I fully agree that given the fact that Muhammad Yunus was hardly in command of situation, his main task originally was to ensure stability and early elections, and we hardly saw that any internal stability was reassured, and minorities continued to be traumatized in all 18 months. And the world saw him pandering to external forces like Pakistan or going to China, signing this trade deal just 3 days before elections with United States. And perhaps in doing all this, he was perhaps imagining he has always had ambition of playing the leadership role in Bangladesh, despite not having any political base. He thought this could be his opportunity to showcase some very decisive changes in at least foreign policy engagements, and could perhaps stake claim for presidentship. But we understand that BNP, given the decisive mandate now, is not supposed to oblige a candidate that BNP doesn't find fit. So it's possible that Muhammad Yunus could go back to teaching either within Bangladesh, and I think that should be much better than going to another Western university to settle down and teach there. So, in that sense, the BNP has a decisive mandate. It has expectations that both people inside Bangladesh will have from it, and of course, countries outside which are in partnership with Bangladesh will have expectations from BNP to ensure, first of all, peace, stability, control on inflation, pandering to radical forces should not be seen as a choice for BNP now. And I think it has to showcase a relatively moderate vision and moderate voice in this increased radicalization of Bangladesh popular narratives in last 18 months. And I think that is perhaps also the indications that we see from whatever we know Tarique Rahman has been speaking so far. He perhaps realizes his responsibility. Indeed, this happens in most democracies that there is always a certain, high octane shrill during electioneering, and the party, when it comes to power, has to really understand the challenges of governance. And then, of course, we begin to see different language. We have seen it in several neighbors of India happening. And I think Bangladesh would see some change likewise, where the much sane voices will perhaps to come to the fore
Right.
and begin focusing on building economic partnerships so that they can go back to constantly trying to revive that economic acceleration, and returning back to Bangladesh becoming model of economic development in that sense.
Right.
So maybe in that case, there could be some role for Muhammad Yunus, that he could go back to what he was good at
Right.
in terms of microcredit initiatives that he had.